Cast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Jeremy?
Yes.
Okay, great. We're about to start the webinar. We have people still signing in, so we'll start in about a minute. Good afternoon, everyone. We're about to start the webinar, Competing on Analytics and Transportation. If you can, take note. If you have questions during the presentation, please type them into the chat box, which is on the GoToMeeting screen, or you can actually tweet those on Twitter with the hashtag HNIU. And what we'll do at the end of the presentation is we'll collect those questions and respond to them at that point in time. As we go through the presentation, everyone will be on mute. So we'll start in a second. Okay, we are queued up and ready to go. My name is Mike Natalizio. Welcome to this HNI University webinar. Our goal at HNIU is to drive change through education. And we've got a great program for you today. What you'll learn today is what is profit-driven leadership? How can analytics change behaviors? And we've got a great story that the people from Nussbaum Transportation will talk about. With us today, we have some real experts. Lloyd Stoller and Jeremy Stickling are from Nussbaum Transportation. Also from HNI, I am Mike Natalizio. I'll be the moderator today. And with me are our two subject matter experts, Don Jerrell and John Sims. Don is from our Wisconsin office and John from Illinois. Don worked with Lloyd and Jeremy throughout the process of building their scorecard. So we're about to jump into the program right now. Before we do, you go to a website and people put information on their website. You'll find this picture of this truck on the Nussbaum website. And it's really noteworthy to see that on this truck, you see setting new ideas in motion and innovation and integrity. In fact, Nussbaum won Commercial Carrier Journal Innovator of the Month. So we've got some real innovators on the line with us today. I'm going to give us a little background on the presentation and talk a little bit about the current state of trucking, the state of complexity. Our guys are out in the field here at HNI, and we've gained a lot of insight working with trucking companies across the country. And complexity really starts with in trucking around compliance. And CSA, if you remember when CSA came out, the biggest change facing the trucking industry since deregulation. Well, that added a lot more complexity, new measurements to worry about, and yet just another thing for us to manage. Not to mention all the new technology, satellite communications that were all intended to make our life simpler. Yeah, right. It's just adding more complexity that we need to deal with. We hear CEOs of trucking companies talk about, my people have all the reports they need to manage their drivers. And we also hear them say, well, my IT department is spending all this time creating custom reports that really nobody seems to be using. Yes, we have all the numbers we need to do our job, but sometimes they look like this graphic. You see, we're really dealing in this information overload age. Information is becoming more and more available at the rate that we can't even absorb it. We don't have the time or the focus to absorb all the information that's available. We're using technology to communicate with our drivers. Yet, why is it that drivers are still underperforming and leaving us? Don, why is that?
Well, it's not pay, it's not miles, it's not home time, it's not equipment, and it's not benefits. All companies have pretty much the same type of packages.
Well, what is it?
Well, what was interesting was a study was performed on drivers, and what they came up with is, why are good drivers leaving companies? This is not my bottom feeders, but good drivers tend to leave companies because, first of all, if they don't have the skills or the training to do the job, then they can't do the job and they'll leave. The second thing is, drivers want to feel good. They want to have a good feeling about what they do at their jobs. And the third thing I thought was so interesting was they feel stuck where they're at. Most drivers want a chance of advancement. They don't necessarily want to go into the office or become an owner-operator if they're company drivers, but they want an opportunity for advancement within the organization.
Very interesting. And these drivers are getting feedback, but the kind of feedback they get is generally negative feedback.
And they're not recognized for high performance. The rule of thumb for drivers, if I don't hear anything from the company, everything must be okay, because the only time I ever hear from the company is when I'm messing up.
And how do they know if they are performing high?
They don't. For most companies, they don't know if they're doing a good job or not.
Well, not at Nussbaum. We'll learn more about that in a bit. So this complexity, the driver view of complexity. You see, traditionally, you had the rear view mirror on the left-hand side, which was safety. Drivers have to keep safety departments happy. On the right-hand side, they had operations. And sometimes those are conflicting viewpoints. But now they have CSA and compliance staring at their right up against them. It's kind of a three-headed monster of complexity. It really leads to the state which we have coined driver dyslexia. You see, driver dyslexia is when operation loves me and safety loves me not. Or the opposite, which is safety loves me and operation loves me not. Then we get to this idea of an annual performance review, which are really sometimes just being done for the file. And John, you're out in the field, you see this happen all the time.
Yeah, we look at a lot of the annual performance reviews, and they really do not focus on performance. In a lot of cases, they focus on just the paperwork, satisfying the regulation with annual review by just looking at the NVR, signing the paper, putting it in the file. Or we take a look at the other part, which is a lot of times they will tell us, well, we talk to our drivers every day. They know where they stand. And so they really don't do an annual review. They really just fill out a piece of paper, put it in the file, and it's done.
Not very objective.
Not very objective at all.
So it leads us to these two simple questions that we often ask is, who are your best performing drivers and who are your worst performing drivers?
And, at most organizations, you go in an operations department and ask them who their best performing drivers are. And obviously it's a person that spends the most miles behind the wheel. Consequently, you go into safety and ask them who their best driver is. It doesn't necessarily match up with who the operations department feels is their best. And the other things that happen there is they go off subjectivity. They're not going off of facts. They're going off how they feel.
So I guess it depends on who you ask.
Absolutely.
So there's this prediction that we've made, and that is that some of those worst drivers are really the drivers you love. And actually, it's kind of if you don't know what the criteria is, you really don't know who's performing. Well, all this complexity leads to three wicked problems that motor carriers are struggling with. And when we talk about wicked problems, we're talking about the kind of problems you can't just write a check and make them go away. They really require change, behavior change. The first one is what we've been talking a little bit about, which is dealing with complexity risk. All that's being driven by CSA. The second one is better managing and improving driver performance. And third, identifying and predicting accidents, those high-risk profiles, the accident waiting to happen. That crystal ball, if we had that, we would know we should take this driver off the road. And it's really all culminating with what we refer to as the complexity squeeze. You know, you have to manage customer demands, you have to manage your drivers, but all that is being squeezed by the complexity and the technology and the time. So, what's the big idea? Let's keep it simple. The folks at Nussbaum have done just that. They've kept it simple. And with all this complexity, the big idea is complexity is sucking the performance out of the trucking industry. That's a pretty bold statement, but we believe that to be true. And in fact, we can't stand still and let that continue to happen. So we want to introduce to you a game-changing approach to managing your fleet using analytics. We're going to do that through the Nussbaum story. It started, though, when we asked the question, what if? What if we could address those three wicked problems, get drivers to better understand how they're performing and stay with us? What if we could do that? You know, oftentimes making the simple complex is common, but making the complex simple, that really takes creativity. And what we're going to talk about today is really a creative approach taken by the Nussbaum company. I guess Albert Einstein said it best, if you can't explain it simply, you don't understand it well enough. So if we ask drivers how they're performing and they can't explain it, then we've got a problem. So here's an idea. How about this? Let's bring the quarterback passer rating to the trucking industry. The NFL has a quarterback passer rating, and you don't have to be a football fanatic to know what we're referring to here. I often ask the question, what's a good quarterback passer rating? Even people that aren't that familiar with football, 9 out of 10 times we get this answer, 100. If you score higher than 100 as a quarterback passer in the NFL, that's a pretty good score. If you're below 100, you probably didn't have the best day. Well, in 2011, we're going to do a little comparison here. You know this guy, Tim Tebow, and you know this guy, Aaron Rodgers. Now, Aaron is above the line, and Tim is below the line. Quarterback passer rating for Tebow was 72.2, and Aaron Rodgers was 122.2. Aaron, you know, we're in Green Bay territory here, so we're going to put his record was 15-1. Tebow actually got the Broncos to the playoffs, but unfortunately, he got traded away. I believe that the Broncos staff understood that his passer rating was below the mark. So here's this idea that the NFL has used. How about creating a quarterback rating for your company? A customized view of performance that matters most to you. Building a performance system to support your goals, your vision from the ground up. Having a dashboard, a tool that you can rely on to manage your fleet that's 100% credible based on how you have defined performance. Moving away from lagging indicators, being reactive, moving towards leading indicators. That's what we're going to get into. So with that big idea, we know it's going to meet resistance. So some of the obstacles in the process that we went through with Nussbaum, we're going to talk a little bit about. And it starts right here. I drew this little picture to demonstrate not that an IT person, but technology is almost seemingly managing and running our companies, that we're playing to IT all the time. We have traditional scorecards. Here's a sampling. These are scorecards that are really hard to understand how you're performing. How would you sit down and read all this information about any one driver? We don't have time. We need clean data that is accurate, credible, and reliable. And we just don't have time in the day to do this. And here's where I want to bring in Lloyd from Nussbaum. And we were talking about this as we were preparing for this presentation. And he said that this is one of the biggest obstacles. Lloyd, how did you find the time to put this project together?
Well, that's a real good question, but before I answer that, I might maybe make a comment here. Way back, you said we got some experts here with Jeremy and myself. We don't look at ourselves as experts. We're just kind of ordinary people here in ordinary transportation. But back to your question here. To find the time is extremely difficult because I think everyone knows that all of us and all levels of trucking industry here are pretty stressed at times, that we have more on our plate than what we can handle. And I think it boils down to just making a commitment that we're going to do this. And once you make that commitment, then you can find little snatches of time to kind of steer away from the great big picture and all of the data that's out there, and zero in on a little piece at the time.
Excellent, excellent. Well, and I think as you started this project, we talked about this, as there will be skeptics, and they may come from the drivers, they may come from your admin staff, it may be management for that matter. But there were several sacrifices that you made. And Jeremy, maybe you could talk about some of those sacrifices that you made through this process.
Yes. Well, like Lloyd mentioned, one of them was time. You know, to allocate time to this, you are letting go of your time on other things that might be dear to you. And you got noted there, changing processes and letting go of the past. The scorecard isn't just a piece of paper with a score on it. There are processes that revolve around it, and almost a change of job description in some cases, or adding to it. And anytime you have that word change or new, it's natural. There's going to be some resistance.
Right. Well, and I think you were lucky you didn't have many skeptics to deal with. And in fact, you said the skeptics are gone. You're not having to deal with that anymore.
Yes, that's correct. There's a full understanding across the company the value that something like this brings when it's done right. Absolutely.
Well, and it really starts at the top. We know that it has to be driven from the top down, and you've been fortunate to have top management owners that have been very supportive. But there's a danger sign. There's a danger, and that is, Don, you want to speak to this?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things people have to understand, if you're going to go down this path and start a project like this, you have to have buy-in from the very top, because there's going to be resources that have to be done. There's going to be processes and procedures that have to be put in place. And if you're not starting from the top, if the person at the very top of your organization is not 100% behind this, then I don't recommend that you go down the path. But boy, when you've got that commitment, it's amazing what you can do with it.
Well, it's a big project. It's a big project, and it's almost like the old saying, "How do you eat the elephant?" Lloyd, when we talked about this a while back, you had mentioned that it's like eating an elephant. You want to expound on that a little bit?
Well, you've all heard this huge mountain, And climbing a mountain, of course, starts with a step at a time. And this huge elephant was in the room. We recognized that we had a lot of data out there, and a lot of data was flowing in, but we didn't have any way to really corral that data and use it in a positive way, or put it together in a positive way. And we recognized the need for that. We were doing the scorecard thing, annual performance review and all of that for all of our driver force. But it wasn't really getting us anywhere and didn't really mean much to us. And we got connected here with the HNI folks, and Don Jerrell became a resource for us. And he had the concept here. And we visited about it numerous times, and he would come back periodically. Maybe at first 3 weeks apart, a month apart, and went to 6 weeks apart. But he would just come back, and he would encourage us to do a little piece at a time, just take a step at a time. We eat the elephant a bite at a time, and we found out if we just don't look at the big finished product that we want and all the processes it takes to get there, we just start small and we do a step at a time, and each step it becomes easier. The bites taste a little better, and it becomes fun. It becomes an enjoyable process then once we get into it and we start recognizing the returns and the value in it.
That's awesome. Great. Well, we've talked about complexity. We've talked about the big idea, and we've talked about the resistance. Let's move on to talk a little bit about the actual scorecard. And we talk about the scorecard as I refer to this as it's a marvel to behold. They did a really nice job. And in fact, it was really reinventing performance management in trucking. We've really come up with a new way to measure performance. And it's a bit of a revolution to bring clarity and simplicity back to transportation. There was a day when that was the case. So Don, here's the checklist that you created for the scorecard development. You want to just touch on the 4 things here?
Well, we want to make sure the categories that we were measuring that they're directly linked to profitability. The beauty of having a scoring system and time weight is you can do things like balance between departments, or have a natural balance between safety and productivity. You want to make sure that it's measurable data points. We don't do anything subjective. If it's something subjective, we can't put it in the system. It has to be objective. And then we have to be clear. We have to communicate effectively the numbers as we get them on a regular basis to all involved.
Those are non-optional.
Non-optional.
All right, good. Well, then there's a process that you follow, and maybe touch on this a bit.
First thing we do is we get our team together and discuss all the various metrics that are out there that are in the organization, in the computer system, in the trucks, all the different things, CS, everything that's out there, and have the team sit together and determine which are the critical success factors for that particular organization. And we want to reemphasize that each organization, it's their own program. It's not a cut and paste, one size fits all. Once we get the metrics in place, we want to weight them. We want to make sure the time elements are properly in place to gather the measurements. And then we start the scoring process.
So not a whole unlike the quarterback passer rating.
Absolutely.
Did you do that as well?
I was not a quarterback.
Okay.
I was a lineman.
Great. Well, we're going to talk a little bit about the components. There's really 3 major components to the scorecard for Nussbaum. And this is going to be their custom scorecard. They've even gone so far as to brand it and name it Driver Accelerator. But what you'll see here is the 3 components being operation, safety, and fuel. Jeremy, fuel. Talk a little bit about why fuel is one of the major components of your scorecard.
Yeah, fuel is, to put it lightly, to understate it, it's a big deal here at Nussbaum. And you can come at it from a number of different angles. There's the equipment, there's the way you design your loads and where you're traveling and stuff. But we really believe, we've heard it and we've experienced it, that a lot of fuel performance is in the driver's right foot. The way they work those pedals, the way they move that truck down the road. And so for us, it was a no-brainer to include fuel as a very big piece. Also, it's one of the biggest immediate payback that you get from it. It is immediate. With safety, maybe it comes through insurance rates. Other things are a little harder to measure, but fuel, that fuel economy goes up. You're spending less on fuel, and it adds up really quick. So it was a very easy decision for us to add that piece into the scorecard.
Cool. Well, let's take a little deeper dive, and if you would, maybe walk us through operations. What goes into the operations component?
Well, with every category, we tried to come up with individual grading metrics that would give a whole picture, either directly or indirectly. We settled on, you can see there, productivity, late delivery, and out of routes. The productivity piece kind of looks at the work that a guy's doing. Anything he gets paid for translates into productivity. So they're getting the real-time feedback on how much value they're bringing that way. Late deliveries, that kind of looks at timeliness and more indirectly customer service. So it catches that aspect of it for us. And then the last piece there, the out of route, that was important to us because it's one thing to get from point A to point B and to get there on time, and it's another thing to get there the right way. So we had practical miles that we score guys off of the routing system that we use, and it's really a holistic approach. They're doing the work, they're doing it timely with customer service focus, and they're getting there the right way.
Jeremy, this is Don. Could you share with the group what is your what have you seen on the out of route? What kind of numbers have you seen on that?
Our standard is 2.5% to get a perfect score. Since we implemented this, we've probably brought it from somewhere in the neighborhood of 4%. I think our fleet average now is 3%. 1% might not sound like a whole lot, but it does translate into big dollars, definitely. And obviously, we're not where we want to be. That 2.5% is where we'd like to be someday, as an average or lower. So that's what we've seen.
Great. Well, that's operations, and now we're going to move over to safety. And so in safety, there's measurements involved as well in that component.
Yeah, I might comment on that here. The hours of service here, obviously that has your compliance measurements there. Of course, we pride ourselves in running compliant with the regulations, and we have very high standards there. So we don't want any logging violations. The accidents, it kind of explains itself there. We have the metrics in there, and the more serious the accident, the more it dings the driver in his points. Moving violations, if he gets the citations, which impacts his MVR. The sudden decelerations was the last module, the safety part that we brought on, and that's to identify some of your higher risk cowboy drivers, if you will. Roadside inspections ties right in with the CSA. So we brought the CSA monster into our safety module here, and it's been very, very successful in helping them understand the impact of a roadside inspection with violations, which they get ding points for those, and also for the clean inspections, we do reward them through our bonus system here as well.
Awesome. Very comprehensive. And then again, the third component, which we touched on earlier, fuel. And Don and I were talking about this earlier, and what we really like about this is it's not only consumption, it's how they purchase fuel. Don.
Yeah, what was really neat about this is, and I'm going to let Jeremy talk about this pretty quickly, but they actually took that extra step. They're not only keeping track of MPG and idle time, the fuel efficiency, but they've also focused in on the fuel purchasing. Jeremy, would you like to share with us your story on that?
Yeah, you'll find when you do the scorecard process and put it together and develop it and start using it, there are offshoots that occur. Extra things where maybe the scorecard approach as a whole is kind of a shotgun approach, but then as we start seeing numbers in individual areas where we can improve, we start taking rifle shots. Maybe a couple examples here, just on the fuel side. We've done all three, but just for the fuel for now. With purchase compliance, we have a system where we are downloading fuel prices, taking into account our discounts, and when a driver gets a route, he's given every 200 miles 3 stops. When we started, it was a pretty lower than what we wanted to see percentage of compliant in general. Well, drivers got on track and the percentage of compliance came up, and that was good, but we had a chance to be very good. By picking the best of the 3 stops, there was substantial savings there. So we took it to another level, and we're offering 5 bonus points, if you will, for guys that picked not just a compliance stop, but one of the best compliance stops.
And could you share with us on the fuel efficiency what you did in-house? I think you've got a really neat story there on a gentleman that you brought into your facility.
Yeah, absolutely. On the MPG side, again, this is another offshoot. We have something that we call, for lack of a better name, I guess, the MPG, or the Nussbaum MPG Fuel Challenge. One thing we ran into a lot of on the fuel scorecard was all of the uncontrollable things that go into fuel. The type of truck you're driving, the loads you're pulling, the terrain you're driving on, things like that, where we do make adjustments, take that into account, but we still get drivers to kind of lean on that as a crutch. And so to address that, we have an individual here in the office. He's driver manager, but he was in the truck over the road for us for a number of years. Before we ever had a bonus program, he was probably one of our top performers. And what we do is a driver will come in. If we see a guy struggling, or if he says there's nothing more I can do, we say, okay, prove it. We bring him in, and Corey runs a 6-mile loop. He comes from behind the desk, jumps into their truck, so he doesn't have a break-in period with the truck. He's coming in cold, and the driver's there knowing that he's going to get fuel training, so he's got that mindset. So the driver will run the 6-mile loop first, and they look at what the MPG is, and then they switch seats. Corey sits in the driver's seat, the driver sits in the passenger seat, and they do the same 6-mile loop, same time period. And very regularly, Corey comes out a full mile per gallon ahead. A full mile per gallon. I think the closest anyone's got is 0.4. And it's not rocket science. These drivers, then often, if there's time, the driver will do the loop again, and they'll be right up there where Corey's at. And what we see then is they leave and they take it with them, and those fuel scores are going up. And so the company's saving money, the drivers bring that bonus score up, they feel good about themselves, and they just put another tool in their pocket as a professional driver.
Awesome. It really does address some of that skepticism that's out there. Well, there you have it.
Yes, it does.
Yeah, there you have it. The 3 components of the Nussbaum scorecard: operations, safety, and fuel. And so what you're doing here is you're taking all of those metrics, rolling them up into one scorecard that the driver sees. And that looks a little something like this. I kind of think this is a thing of beauty. I said earlier, I think Steve Jobs would eat his heart out by seeing something this simple and this beautiful. You've got a score for a driver that takes those 3 components or categories, and it comes up with a total score, what I like to refer to as the quarterback passer rating. 1 score for that driver, and he happens to be in the gold category. But I also noticed a little something down below there in the green. What is that?
That is our bonus program is quarterly, So that dollar amount you see right there is the quarterly bonus payout that Mark obtained. And you can see we try to make it substantial, more than just get their notice. Put a desire in them to get to that gold level, because the reward is there. And I will throw in, nobody here thinks we have too much money into this. Nobody.
Into the bonus.
So you've had this bonus program and you didn't go out of business, huh? So what do you got planned in the future on this?
Well, it has proven to be so successful. We are so sold on this because it is bringing our numbers up on a continuous basis, some of them more aggressively than others. Our president and top managers all the way down are seeing that this is where there is a tremendous potential. And as the drivers have really weighed in on it, and they really are talking it up, it's starting to take hold very strong. We have a lot of drivers that have a strong desire to be a gold driver. The other levels would be bronze or silver or nothing at all. And we do have plans here later this year. We just gave a driver increase here effective the 1st of June that's going to take place just across the board. But then we are going to be throwing substantial dollars into this bonus program. We're going to be announcing it. Our plans are to announce it here the first part of August to be effective September 1st. And we will be most likely doubling the dollars that we are going to be putting into our bonus program, so that those drivers that are bringing us the returns will be receiving substantial rewards, and those drivers that are more marginal are going to be really encouraged to bring up their scores, or else they're not going to earn the same dollars as the better drivers.
So I guess it's an understatement to say you have confidence that the tool is really measuring performance.
That is an understatement.
Yeah.
We are convinced at this point that it is across the board, and it's not only in one area. You know, a driver can do good in 2 of these areas, and if he does poorly in another one, he will not be a gold driver. You really need to be able to be a gold driver. You have to be performing in all 3 areas.
Great. Well, and you mentioned a management tool, that it really is being used effectively to better manage drivers. And you've got this kind of a report card comes out once a month, and it's very holistic. As you were just saying, Lloyd, the driver can't just do good in one category or one component of the scorecard. They have to perform in all 3. It's very holistic. And then, you know, maybe you've seen this. Have you seen more gold drivers reaching that level, or are they striving to hit that gold level?
Yeah, oh, absolutely. I don't have the numbers in front of me, but if you go back a year ago, from our last payouts, I believe the amount of drivers in the gold level, I want to say it doubled. And that's, you know, we build this program that the higher the scores, the more we pay out, the more we're saving. So the higher bonus amounts that we can pay out, the happier we are, because that's coming in and then some.
Awesome. And just a side note, there are some questions coming in, so go ahead and keep plugging those in. We'll get to those to the end. I noticed a couple coming in, so please feel free to add questions. So we talked about a management tool, but when it comes down to, you know, using it as a training tool, Lloyd, I know you've used this very effectively in determining who needs help.
Yeah, that's right. In the old system, it was something that somebody would come in because they were having a problem. We needed to work on a specific problem. A lot of things were falling through the crack because if they had a great personality or if they were a tremendous producer, we didn't really put a lot of focus on bringing these drivers in to help them do well in all areas. And we were missing it. We really didn't know who were the ones that were doing us the best job. The whole focus here is to help the drivers really feel good about themselves and about their job. A new driver can start, and we explain this whole process to them. It's not ever on the scenario that we're bringing them in to bawl them out or to scold them or to slap their hands or to give them written warning letters or whatever. We're actually bringing them in so that we can help them be successful. We can help them earn up to their full potential because they have a lot of capabilities, and a lot of times they just need to know what they need to do in order to do it. And a lot of these areas in our metrics is very, very simple to do it. It's very simple to stop where we want them to buy fuel, or to not idle so much, or to take the roads that we tell them to take, or to not speed so you don't get that unsafe driving in the CSA, or whatever it might be. There's just lots and lots of potential here.
Well, and the drivers know as well. They know right where their weak spots are as well. You don't have to convince them or tell them what they are. It's pretty clear to them already as they come in.
You're right. They can see their score. It makes a believer out of them because we can show them where they rank in the company as a whole in any particular category, and they can try to improve their rank, and they can try to bring up their scores because the numbers are what are doing the talking.
Yep, and they know what every driver is in the fleet.
That's correct. They know where they fall. Yes, every driver knows where they fall in relation to all the other drivers in the fleet.
So you're starting to see another management tool as you start to pick up on trends, and some are good and some aren't. But here's a good one. This is a drill down on fuel, and this is one particular driver that is spiking up. As you said earlier, fuel being immediate, I'm guessing he's becoming a much more profitable driver now than he was before.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. And that picture there, obviously, we're happy because he's kicking money back to us, and it's the same story for him. It's a win-win.
Great. We're going to move on, and one of the questions that's come in is what tool is being used, and we should probably comment on this, that Nussbaum has a very robust IT department that pulled over the last couple of years this information together, and this is one of the drill down screens that driver managers can use, management can use it. Let's talk a little bit about this, Lloyd. This happens to be the safety screen. Is that right?
Yes, this is the safety screen, and we have all these screens are available, or the whole Driver Excel program is available to all of our driver managers. And many of us, as soon as the driver is on the phone and he's calling, we will pull up their information. And depending on their question, depending on the comment, depending on what is actually going on with this driver at the time, the driver manager or we in safety or whatever area it might be can kind of focus in at a click of a button and get where their issues are. This particular driver does rank number 1 in safety. You can see that under the rank column there. We can push the safety tab and it could bring this up. I can look at this and I can see, okay, from November of 2011, he was number 65 in our fleet. Now he's number 1, just simply because of what has happened with his scores. And that's available with all of the matrix. We can do the same with fuel. We can do the same with operations. And then each one, all those subtitles across there, will also show you the different weights that we put on, the point system that we put on that's added together, going to give him the score that he gets for safety for that particular month.
Awesome.
Yeah, and it's this screen where you can start getting down to the individual details. You can see the tabs across the top. If we want to see a specific log violation on him, he doesn't have any, but if he was a problem driver, we could click on that tab. We could see when log violations occurred, what were they? Was it a 14-hour? Was it 11-hour? We can really get into the details on the individual level here.
Great. Well, this next slide here is one that I think is near and dear to Brent's heart, Brent being the owner at Nussbaum. It's really not worth undertaking if we aren't getting results. And so here we're showing over time improvement in fleet results. Jeremy, I think you mentioned earlier that this really doesn't look like a huge incline, but for every step up, those are significant bottom line results. Another byproduct that we found through this process is, oh, sorry.
Jeremy, what was that?
A little bit. What I was saying was, yeah, the points really start meaning more once they get to 500. So that upward trend is significant.
Great. Other byproducts from going through this process, Lloyd has shared that he now has a history of performance and documented conversations with drivers. And here you see that an employee response, a driver being very receptive. They're looking for help, and they're actually feeling good after coming in and meeting with Lloyd.
I think one of the beauties of this program.
Yeah, that's correct.
I think Lloyd, if you can talk about this, but I think one of the beauties of the program is how it's changed.
Okay, on the.
Go ahead. We're having some technical problems here.
That one where they had the notes in there as far as the driver communications, we do have a communication tab, and anybody that talks to a driver, any issues they have, this one here, any discipline that they have, any corrective measures that we are taking, any encouragement that we give them, no matter what the area is, we can document it in here. The driver manager can go in here, any of us can go in here, and we can document just communications that we have had with the driver in an effort to try to help him feel even better about his job. It's not an adversarial type of thing. I think they are convinced that the driver managers and across the board, we are doing everything we can to try to help them be successful. And this is largely on the part of driver managers that are doing this. This is not me that's talking to them. They come in regularly, they talk to them on the phone regularly, and they are talking to their driver managers because they're very involved in the whole scorecard process. In fact, they're the ones that make it work. And just what's noted on here, you can see that Brian, being the driver, was very receptive. He had a lot of good questions and wants to get his scores up. And that's very typical of what we're seeing. They are really buying into this and wanting to perform, which is different than it just being a mundane job for them.
That's great. On this next slide, we talk about seeing change. And Jeremy, you mentioned earlier that change is sometimes seen as a negative, but when we're having increases, percentage increases, we're actually starting to see some of those leading indicators we talked about earlier. Jeremy, talk a little bit about how you use this report.
Yeah, absolutely. This is just a little piece of one of the screens in our software. And that percentage is showing the change from month to month. We can go back and make it longer periods of time as well. But what that allows us to do is we can act now, as opposed to maybe an annual evaluation. This driver's getting this feedback. He can see his score going up and down, and we're seeing it too. And there's another end of the spectrum of this percent change. We have guys that go negative, and we can see those almost real time, and we're on top of it and fixing a problem before it becomes bigger as time passes.
Great. Well, that is the scorecard, and I think probably the most inspiring component of this story, aside from all the things that you've done so far, is the real cultural transformation that has taken place. And that we talk often about culture and performance. You can't have one without the other, and I think you've improved in both areas. And This little phrase here, that culture eats strategy for breakfast, is one of my favorites, because if you had this scorecard and the culture rejected it, it wouldn't work. You wouldn't have the kinds of results that you're getting. And so there was a successful way that you went about rolling this out to the culture. And let's talk a little bit about how you went ahead and did that.
It pretty much speaks for itself here, the little screen that they have. It all started out with, of course, the design. Top management on down, we got the resources from HNI to kind of help us steer us, and it did go to top manager, which, of course, that was easy because they were the ones that were also pushing this all the way through as well. And then, of course, we took it to the frontline managers, supervisors that are working with the drivers all the way through, and then, of course, to the driver ranks as well. So it just kind of is a natural course of action that's going to come as we start putting those pieces in one at a time here.
And I would add a couple arrows to the graphic. You'll find as you rolled out, it's somewhat of a revolving process. The design team, you start getting ideas from management, from the driver managers, from company drivers. What does this mean, or why don't you look at this, or how you score on this? And as this comes back, for a while there, it's a moving process. So it circles back on each other, and it ends up in a better product.
There's been a lot of talk out there about the scoring system, and many people have those for drivers, but could you expand a little bit on the meetings that you have, the driver manager meetings, your top management meetings? What are you doing to make sure these numbers keep getting better?
Yeah, we've actually pulled the driver managers in. Obviously, they are also being scored on how well they are doing at bringing their drivers' scores up as a whole. We have some friendly competition in here. Based on the drivers' efforts and the scores of the driver managers' efforts and their particular drivers' scores, how they bring them up. We have a driver manager of the month that is selected, and the driver managers meet on a monthly basis to look at the scores as a whole in operations, and each one particular areas, and the ones that are doing well and the ones that are doing mono, they talk among themselves of what's been working for them and what more could they be doing. There's a team of us that gets together every month, and we look at the performers and make decisions on a company-wide basis what we're going to do with them. So first of all, our efforts are to bring them along, and once we assure that we can bring them along, of course, the numbers speak for themselves, are going to never learn and never do any better because of whatever factors it might be, then we eventually have a good basis of documentation in order to move them on without any fear of any kind of litigation or anything like that. That's not, of course, the goal of it. And then, of course, quarterly, the president and the top managers meet as well to look at the progress that we're making as a whole.
So as a culture, this transformed culture, you really built awareness. And some of the things that you mentioned you're doing, you're certainly celebrating. We all have to take time and step back from the day-to-day to celebrate the successes, the progress we're making. You're having quarterly drawings and actually bringing fun into the equation. And I think what you were starting to talk a little bit about, this is a working together kind of culture that we can't win, the drivers can't win if the company doesn't win, and vice versa. So we're working together to find ways to improve our scores and our performance. And then this last bullet point here, that drivers are staying with you. And I know a lot of people on the line here would be very happy to have a turnover rate that you have of 25%, but that's a very impressive number. And I know over time that's improved. Give us a little history of how your turnover has changed over the last couple of years.
By and large, we are not dedicated. We're irregular route, but we had some struggles with our turnover in years past. 3 years ago, we were at 41%. Then we were at 34% the next year, and now we're at 25%. So we do see the direction going the right way. And of course, if we go back further in time, prior to any of this, we did have some years that were even higher than the 41. So in that aspect, it has brought some very nice returns as well. And the drivers are talking it up. We're getting, trucks are all filled and then some. We're getting a lot of very nice referrals from our current drivers because they like it's just the overall culture. They just like the fact that they feel like they're being helped to be successful.
And I bet that when you first started this process, that probably wasn't the first thing that you thought of. You probably thought some drivers would feel like this was Big Brother and micromanaging them.
Yeah, that's very true. It's really been refreshing when you bring a guy through. You sit down with them, you go face to face. It's amazing the reception you get to any training or instruction or anything you want to pass along. It really is.
Cool. Okay, well, we're moving on towards total alignment. And in the old days, if you asked the driver, in this picture here on the left-hand side, what's your score? What's your performance score? The number in their head probably didn't equal their actual performance. And I might argue that it's probably higher because they had their own criteria that they measured themselves against. And when you achieve what you have achieved at Nussbaum, which is the score in the driver's head is exactly equal to their actual performance based on the metrics that you set forth, you have total alignment, not only with the driver, but we talked a little bit earlier, Don had talked about it's not just a driver's score. This is an organization-wide initiative to align us from the department leaders to driver managers to the driver. Don, you want to talk a little bit about that as far as total alignment goes?
I think that's one of the neat things about this is everybody's pushing the wagon the same direction. Not only does the driver get a score each month, but the driver manager gets a score each month that they're accountable for improving their score. And each department gets a score. And so it ties everything together that everybody's pushing in the same direction, and it builds a lot of success.
Yeah, when you have alignment, this is the way Lloyd had described it, that the culture becomes that of a collaborative culture. And, we've got transparency. The numbers are known. Everyone knows where they stand. There's accountability. You're expected to reach certain levels and a culture of performance. We're all looking at how we can collaborate to improve performance. So that is a bit of the transformation that's taken place at Nussbaum. Now we're going to talk a little bit about you and the people that are on the line here that have actually started to put some of these questions in, asking, as I see some of the questions, well, how can we do this? Is there a way for us to do the same thing? So the call to action, and what is your role? And you might be thinking, as we talked about earlier, that this is some heavy stuff, some heavy lifting, and how are we going to be able to undertake this? It took Nussbaum several years. We don't have that much time. So how can we help you eat the elephant? And this is a question that we're getting often, and we have a process that we can assist you with. not to get into a sales pitch here, anyone can do this on their own. Nussbaum is a perfect example of someone that did do it on their own, but they, like I said earlier, they're blessed to have an IT staff that was not only capable, but they had the capacity to do this. That seems to be, and Don, you could speak to this, that's usually the biggest obstacle. Most people can see the rationale and the emotional reasons to do this, but when it comes time to pulling it all together is when it becomes tough.
Yeah, I've been doing this thing for 12 years now, and the absolute biggest challenge is the IT department is getting their time. And people start off with good intentions, and we're going to do this, and 3 months later, it's a new phone system, it's a new computer, it's something else new in the company, and the IT person gets pulled away, and then we're trying to drag them back, and that's really probably the biggest challenge at most carriers is, how can we get past all the time it takes for our IT department to do this?
Yeah, and how can we get to driving results? So we partnered with a company called Rare, and HNI is in the business now of helping develop scorecards. We've been doing this for 12 years, and so there's a scorecard development phase, and then there's a technology phase, and we did not have the resources to pull this all together, which is why we partnered with Rare to get the data feed so that we can feed the scorecard to start driving results. And so that, as you can see on the screen there, we've got a fee to do the scorecard development, which is the deciding what metrics are appropriate, weighting them, and then getting the data to feed that, and then on a monthly fee to continue to provide the kinds of reports that Nussbaum was showing. But before you'd want to do that, I think it's important that you go through this exercise, and that is create an expected return on investment. Where do you think you can have an impact, where this will impact your organization? And we go right to, where is the ROI? It's in your expenses. I think that Nussbaum and Jeremy and Lloyd, you're starting to see expense reduction. Some of this it in your heart, but you're also starting to see it. But all of these areas that are on the screen are expenses that are in a trucking company. Which one do you think you've had the greatest impact with your scorecard? Which expense level?
Probably fuel. If I had to pick one, probably fuel. But you could really make a case for all of them. You really could.
Yeah. So a comprehensive approach to all of those expenses, right? The next slide here is talking
that's
about.
Correct. It's hitting.
Go ahead.
I was just saying, yeah, that's correct. Comprehensive approach to everything.
Well, and if we break down those expenses in this sample calculation here, we don't have to drive behavior change all that much to get significant dollars. And, if we look at fuel, I don't think the cost of fuel is going down anytime soon. And it can be a very competitive advantage. You can move the needle a little bit and save significant dollars. So the challenge is for you, if you have a scorecard or many scorecards, does it make sense to do something like what Nussbaum has done? And on the left-hand side are some of the reasons to not do it or stay the same. We know them, we've covered them earlier. And then on the right-hand side, some of the reasons to change the game. It's our tagline here at HNI, to drive change and change the game. Building that culture of performance and collaboration is certainly one that will pay dividends over the years. So what role can you play? Don plays a role. He probably plays all of these roles, but these were the roles that we identified as somebody in your organization has to take these roles on and be a champion.
And sometimes you get multiple roles because you're going to be instigating activities. There's times where you're going to be generating the ideas, talking amongst each other, come up with it. You may be the person that's ultimately responsible for getting the resources so that we can do it, and at the same time influencing and dealing with perceptions.
Lloyd and Jeremy, did you seem to play all those roles or one role in particular?
Oh, actually, the two of us had a part in all of those, I believe. We were kind of some of the drivers of the whole thing here too. So really, it does take all of these. One over the other, probably couldn't say. So some of the other players in it, of course, could kind of zero into just one of these rather than all of them.
Great. Well, hopefully you've been inspired. We wanted to share at least the highlights of the Nussbaum story, what they're doing. We could certainly have done this for several hours to get into all the details, but we wanted to do a high-level overview. If you're willing to move forward, let us know. We can certainly add more thoughts to the process. But we'd like to end, before we get to the questions, on a few final thoughts. The first one being that what took years to do in the past, we can now jumpstart. With our affiliation with RARE, we now have the technology that we can use to power up a scorecard with our resources to help you design the scorecard and roll it out. It can now be done in months, a few short months, as opposed to what took years in the past.
We can customize. It's not a one size fits all. We're able to customize it to fit your specific company and what you feel your metrics need to be. And the final thing is that what we can bring to the table is we can eliminate some of the pitfalls. We've been doing this for so many years that we know some of the things that work and some of the things that don't work. So we can speed processes, we can fast track, we can avoid some of the pitfalls, some of the potholes that we've had to battle through over the last 12 years.
Great. So that's the presentation. We talked about the current state of trucking, the state of complexity. We talked about this big idea that complexity is sucking the performance out of trucking. We talked about the resistance that undergoing this project, you're going to meet some resistance. The scorecard itself, I mean, the beauty and the simplicity of the Nussbaum scorecard and how they really transformed their culture and taken profit-driven leadership, which means everyone in their organization is focused in on profit-driven leaders. It's not just the top management, it's everybody in the organization, and actually turning numbers into true performance. So a very nice story. We want to thank the people from Nussbaum. They're going to stay on and answer any questions that we may have. And we're going to get to those right now. Andrea's pulling up a few questions. I'll read these and anyone can answer on the panel. We were wondering what the percentage of bonus is versus the regular wages. For example, if a driver is a gold award bonus, could he increase his total income by 25%?
That's a good question. I think we are, and like I said, no one thinks we're too high on this, but right now it's in the neighborhood of 5% of pay.
5%?
For our best, you get as high as 10%, some of the real high performers. But we're right in that neighborhood right now. Yep, correct.
Great. Okay, here's another question from Mark. What tool is being used to monitor your out-of-route miles?
Our trucks all have EOBRs, and this is where that slide about data accuracy and scrubbing comes in, one of those potholes. We download that data using our GPS, and we set that side by side with the routing for each trip, the practical routing. and we can actually, I don't want to go into too much detail here, but we can actually follow that little tractor along the line and see where it deviates from the practical miles. But we use a mix of PeopleNet, EOBR recorders, and our PC Practical Miles and our dispatch software. Pulls it all together.
Great. So another question here from Robert. How would you apply this to an owner-operator based company?
That might be one for me to step in on. Have done many of them for owner-operators. You just have different categories that you measure. For example, I really don't care about an owner-operator's MPG or out or out, but I do care about things like monthly maintenance reports being turned in, paperwork. I do care about their productivity. You just have different categories that you use for owner-operators.
The other key with owner operators is that they want and seek a lot of knowledge because they're running a business on their own. So some of the standard categories, like the miles per gallon, may be important to them just because of the fact they want to know where they stand and they compare with their peers. Giving them the knowledge and customizing, and that's what the beauty of this scorecard is. It can be customized to any operation, whether it be with independent contractors or with company drivers or a mixture of both.
Great. Here's another question from Terry. Do you post fleet scores or are they kept for internal use?
What we do is their internal use. We do not post them to the drivers. We let them know what is happening on a bigger picture basis, but on an individual driver basis, we do not do that.
They can see their ranking in the fleet. We didn't have any graphics showing that, but they do see their ranking. And when we're sitting, with the driver at our desk going over things, we'll show them everything on the screen. We'll show them their list in the continuum.
And I've worked with many companies that do post them. The majority of them do not post with names or identification. Some do. Some say we're putting it all out there. But other ones will just post all the scores, and the driver certainly knows what their score is, and they can go and look at that.
There are some companies that we work with that actually post it onto a marquee set of displays and will run the truck number with it. And so it's posted, and the accountability is done with the truck number, but that plays on the big screen TV in the driver lounge, so everyone has a chance to see who is where and where they rank.
Here's another couple of questions that are revolving around union driving organizations, and is Nussbaum a union company?
Nussbaum is not. I have worked with some union companies on this. Just a different perspective. If you're using it as a recognition and reward program and you get the union involved, which is what we did, the union sat down with us and helped us put this program together as a recognition program, and they actually supported it. So I think it's a matter of how you present it. If you're presenting it as a discipline, if you're presenting it from that perspective, it's one thing. But on the other hand, if working with the union operation, you want to get the union involved, and so they're part of the process of putting it together.
In fact, because the measurements are very objective, many of the union companies have found this to be refreshing, that it's very objective and helpful. Another question. Does your product gather the information, or is it inputted manually?
I guess it depends on the situation for the company that you're with. We try to, as much as possible, pull the product from information sources. It may be your communication system in your truck. It may be, Qualcomm, PeopleNet, something like that, the CSA system, your payroll system. Some of the things like accidents, what we've done with RARE is we've developed an accident register. So whenever there is an accident, you go in and fill out the accident register, and now it takes that, and not only does it do your registers for you, it also feeds the system. So it just kind of depends on what the category is and where that company's at.
The goal is to not have to do anything manually.
Right.
We want this to be as smooth and as simple as possible. And anytime we can get around manual input, we do. Lloyd, hey, you got a question. How did your categories change over the process? Great question. from Tom.
We started with safety. That was kind of the springboard, and it was fairly simple in comparison to the other two to put into place. And after that was developed, we went to the fuel module, and as that was near completion, we went to the operations module.
I think it's important to throw out there that we wanted to be very careful not to overwhelm the drivers, not just suddenly have a meeting one day and dump all this on their lap at one time. So we kind of slid it in, a piece at a time. We got the drivers acclimated and used to having a safety scorecard each month, and then we just kind of added categories as we went along so it wasn't such a shock to them to get it all at once.
So I think most of the other questions that I'm reading on the screen maybe occurred before we had talked about some of the information. I think we have addressed all of the questions. So with that, I'm going to throw this back to the last slide. Which is if you have any other questions, or if you'd like to see a live demo of the tool. Many of the questions on here are regarding the tool itself. We didn't get into a live demo here because I think sometimes we get too enamored with the tool. We wanted to make sure we covered the high level. If you are interested in a live demo of the tool or have any other questions, I've got the email addresses for myself, Don, and John on the screen right now. Feel free to send us an email, and we will respond promptly. Thank you again, and I want to thank some of our sponsors that have been very helpful in supporting HNI University. And thank you all for attending, and most importantly, Lloyd and Jeremy, you've been great to work with over the last several years, especially over the last couple days where you've been willing to share your scorecard and what you've done, the process and your story. And there's not many people willing to do that. And so I want to thank you for sharing. As you guys told me early on, that if it can make the industry better, then you're all for it. And so that's admirable, and we appreciate it. So thank you all, and we'll sign off right now.